Captain Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of his warship. The metal floor beneath his boots vibrated with the steady hum of the engines. Outside the thick windows, countless stars scattered across the darkness like tiny diamonds. His ship, the Earth vessel Vengeance, had been flying through this empty part of space for 3 long months. Nothing had happened during that time. No battles, no emergencies, no problems. For most people, this would be good news. For Kane and his crew, it felt wrong. The bridge around him buzzed with quiet activity. 20 crew members sat at their stations, watching screens filled with numbers and graphs. Green lights blinked steadily on every control panel. Everything was working perfectly. Too perfectly. Kane rubbed the old scar on his left cheek. He had gotten it during the Battle of Titan 5 years ago. Back then, aliens had tried to destroy human colonies. They learned quickly that attacking humans was a very bad idea. Now, most alien species in the galaxy knew to leave Earth's children alone, but Kane wondered if they were planning something new. Lieutenant Commander Elena Voss turned away from her communication station. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her brown eyes looked worried. She had been monitoring radio, signals from across the galaxy, for the past 6 hours. Usually she picked up normal chatter between trading ships and colony reports. Today was different. "Captain," she said, her voice cutting through the bridge noise. "We have received something. Strange." Kane walked over to her station. The screen showed waves of electronic signals dancing up and down like ocean waves. "What kind of strange, Commander?" "A distress signal, sir. But it is not like anything in our computer files. The signal is very old, older than any alien language." "We know. It is weak, almost impossible to hear. And, Captain," she paused, checking her instruments again, "it is coming from the void sector." The bridge became completely silent. Every person stopped what they were doing and looked at Kane. The void sector was a place that gave nightmares to even the bravest space travelers. It was a region of space where entire civilizations had disappeared without any explanation. Ships would enter that area and never come out. The Galactic Council, which governed most alien species, had made it illegal to go there over 200 years ago. "How many ships are sending this signal?" Kane asked. He already knew the answer would be bad. "The signal pattern suggests a convoy of civilian vessels. 17 ships total, Captain. One of them appears to be a large colony transport. If our computers are correct, it could be carrying over 50,000 people." Kane felt his jaw muscles tighten. Every human in the galaxy knew the rules. When someone called for help, humans answered. It did not matter how dangerous the situation was. It did not matter if the people calling for help were aliens who had once been enemies. It did not matter if following those rules might get humans killed. This was simply who they were. The other alien species thought this behavior was crazy. They called humans Deathworlders because Earth was such a dangerous planet that only insane creatures could have evolved there. They were probably right. But humans had learned long ago that some things were more important than staying safe. "Commander Torres," Kane called to his weapons officer. Diego Torres was a young man with quick fingers and a sharp mind. He could calculate firing solutions faster than most computers. "How long until we can reach the source of that signal?" Torres typed rapidly on his keyboard. Numbers flashed across his screen as he calculated distances and engine speeds. 18 hours at maximum burn, sir. But, Captain, our current orders specifically prohibit any ship from entering the void sector. Command was very clear about this." Kane looked around the bridge at his crew. These men and women had followed him through 3 major battles and dozens of smaller conflicts. They had seen him make hard decisions before. They trusted him to make the right choice now. "Our orders," Kane said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of human moral code, "are to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We do not abandon people who need our help. Commander Voss, send a message to the other ships in our fleet. Tell them to prepare for immediate departure to the Void Sector. Sir, Voss replied, should I also send a report to Fleet Command about our change in mission? Kane thought about this for a moment. Fleet Command would order them to stay away from the Void Sector. They would say it was too dangerous. They would tell Kane to wait for backup ships or to let someone else handle the rescue. But by the time backup arrived, 50,000 people would be dead. Send the report after we leave, Kane said. By the time they receive it, we will already be committed to the rescue. The human fleet consisted of 5 warships. Besides Kane's vengeance, there was the Retribution under Captain Rex Dalton, the Defiance commanded by Jake Morrison, the Warhawk with Sarah Cross as captain, and the Thunder led by Captain Lisa Park. Each ship carried 300 crew members, and enough weapons to destroy a small moon. As the 5 ships changed course toward the Forbidden Sector, their engines began to glow brighter. The space around them filled with the blue light of their faster-than-light drives charging up. Within minutes, they would be traveling at speeds that would carry them across dozens of star systems. Far away, near the edge of the Void Sector, something very old and very evil felt the approaching ships. This ancient creature had been waiting in the darkness for a very long time. It had learned that the best way to catch prey was to use bait. The distress signal was not real. The 17 alien ships were real, but they were trapped, held prisoner by the creature's power. For centuries, this entity had used the same trick. It would capture a group of innocent travelers and use their distress calls to attract rescuers. When other ships came to help, the creature would capture them too. It fed on the life force of the trapped beings, growing stronger with each meal. Most species in the galaxy were smart enough to be careful. They would approach slowly, scan for dangers, and often decide the risk was too great. Some would try to mount rescue operations, but they would plan carefully and bring overwhelming force. This gave the creature time to prepare, to set better traps, to choose which ships to capture first. But humans were different. The creature could sense their ships now, and their behavior made no sense. Instead of slowing down to scan for dangers, they were speeding up. Instead of calling for backup, they were charging ahead with just 5 ships. Instead of planning a careful approach, they seemed to be preparing for war. The creature had never encountered anything like this before. In its long existence, it had learned to predict how different species would react to danger. Fear, caution, calculation, diplomacy, these were normal responses. But the approaching human ships radiated something else entirely. They radiated pure determination mixed with controlled anger. As the human fleet prepared to jump into hyperspace, Kane stood at the front of his bridge looking out at the stars. Somewhere ahead of them, people were dying. Somewhere in the darkness, an enemy was waiting. His crew was about to fly into a trap that had already killed dozens of rescue fleets. But Captain Marcus Kane was human, and humans had a very simple rule about traps. When someone uses innocent people as bait, you don't avoid the trap, you spring it. Then you kill whatever set it. The 5 ships vanished into hyperspace, carrying 3,000 of Earth's children, toward a confrontation that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. 18 hours later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Void Sector. What they found waiting for them was impossible to describe using normal words. Commander Lisa Park, Kane's science officer, stared at her instrument, readings, in complete shock. She had studied space phenomena for 15 years, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this. "Captain," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "the distress signal is coming from inside a massive gravitational anomaly. It is not a black hole, but something completely different. The space around it is twisted in ways that should not be possible. On the main viewing screen, reality itself seemed to bend and fold around a dark sphere roughly the size of Earth's moon." The sphere was perfectly black, but around its edges, space looked like broken glass. Stars behind it appeared stretched and distorted. Some appeared to be in multiple places at once. Within the anomaly's area of influence, 17 alien ships hung motionless in space. Their hulls glowed with an unnatural blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Kane studied the scene carefully. In 30 years of military service, he had learned to recognize when something was wrong. This felt like a trap, but it was unlike any trap he had ever seen. The alien ships looked real enough, but their position made no sense. They were floating, in a place where the laws of physics seemed to have stopped working. "Life signs?" Kane asked. Park checked her sensors again. "Confirmed on all vessels, Captain. I am reading thousands of life forms across the 17 ships. But, sir, the readings are unstable. The life signs are getting weaker every hour. Whatever is happening to those people, they do not have much time left." Captain Rex Dalton's voice came through the communication system from his ship. The Retribution. Dalton was an older man with gray hair and scars from a dozen battles. He had been fighting alongside Kane for over 10 years. "Marcus, my engineering team is screaming warnings about that anomaly. They say the energy readings are off the charts. Anything that gets too close might not be able to get back out." Kane looked at the tactical display on his screen. The alien ships were trapped inside what appeared to be some kind of space-time distortion field. They were close enough to rescue, but reaching them would require flying into the anomaly itself. For most species in the galaxy, this would be suicide. Their ships would be torn apart by the gravitational forces, or worse, trapped forever like the vessels they were trying to save. But humans had earned their reputation as Deathworlders for a reason. They had evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill them. Deadly storms, poisonous animals, crushing gravity, and toxic atmosphere had shaped them into creatures that treated impossible situations as normal problems to be solved. Other species calculated risks and made careful plans. Humans just got angry and attacked the problem directly. "Commander Voss, open a communication channel to the alien vessels," Kane ordered. "Channel open, sir." "Unknown vessels. This is Captain Kane of the United Earth Fleet. We have received your distress call and are moving to assist. Prepare for emergency evacuation procedures." The response came immediately, but it was filled with static and interference. The voice was high-pitched and musical, clearly from an alien species. "Human vessels, you must not approach. This is Research Director Caney of the Corvani expedition. We discovered something in this region, something that should have remained buried forever. The entity controlling this anomaly feeds on living beings. It has trapped us here to use as bait for—" The transmission cut off suddenly as one of the alien ships simply vanished. It did not explode or break apart. One moment, it was there, glowing with blue light, and the next moment it was gone completely. A pulse of dark energy rippled out from the center of the anomaly where the ship had been. Kane counted the remaining vessels. 16 ships left. Whatever was controlling this anomaly had just demonstrated its power by making an entire ship disappear. The message was clear. This was a trap, and the humans were the intended prey. "All ships, this is Kane," he announced to his fleet. "We are looking at a predator that uses innocent people as bait. It captures victims and waits for rescuers to arrive. Then it captures the rescuers too. Most species would retreat at this point and call for backup." He paused, looking around his bridge at the crew members who had followed him through so many dangerous situations. "But we are not most species. All ships, prepare for battle. We are going into that anomaly." The response from his fleet captains was immediate and unanimous. Not one of them suggested retreat or caution. Captain Sarah Cross from the Warhawk was the first to respond. "About time, Kane. I was getting bored." Captain Jake Morrison from the Defiance added, "My crew has been asking when we get to shoot something. Should I tell them to load the special ammunition?" "Load everything we have," Kane replied. "If this thing wants a fight, let's give it one it will never forget." The entity controlling the anomaly felt the approaching human ships and was confused. In over 1,000 years of existence, it had learned to predict how different species would react when they discovered its trap. Most would scan the area carefully, trying to understand what they were facing. Some would attempt long-range rescues, staying safely outside the anomaly's influence. Others would retreat immediately and warn their governments about the danger. But these human ships were doing none of those things. Instead of slowing down to plan a careful approach, they were accelerating toward the anomaly at full speed. Their weapon systems were charging up, and their engines were glowing brighter as they prepared for combat. They were not acting like rescuers at all. They were acting like predators who had found something they wanted to kill. "Incoming transmission from the aliens," Commander Voss reported. The interference was worse now, but she managed to clean up the signal enough to understand the words. "Put it through," Kane ordered. A new voice came through the speakers, older and more urgent than the first. "Human fleet, I am Research Director Caney of the Corvani Scientific Expedition. The entity you are approaching has consumed 14 different rescue fleets over the past 3 centuries. Each time it feeds, it grows stronger and more intelligent. You must warn your people about this threat and leave us to our fate." "Not happening," Kane cut him off. "How long before your life support systems fail completely?" "Perhaps 6 hours. But you do not understand. This creature exists partially outside normal space and time. Your weapons may not be able to harm it at all. It has powers that—" "Then we have 6 hours to figure out how to kill it," Kane interrupted. "Commander Torres, I want firing solutions on that anomaly. Everything we have got." Torres worked quickly at his weapons console. "Sir, our computers cannot get accurate targeting data through all that interference. The energy readings suggest this thing exists in multiple dimensions at once. Our weapons might pass right through it without causing any damage." Kane smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a predator that had just spotted prey. "Then we will just have to get creative. All ships break formation. Surround that anomaly and prepare to fire on my command." The 5 human warships spread out around the dark sphere, their weapons trained on the center of the distortion. The entity reached out with tendrils of dark energy, expecting to begin its slow process of draining life force from the newcomers. It had done this hundreds of times before with other species. Instead, the humans opened fire. Plasma cannons erupted in brilliant flashes of light. Fusion torpedoes streaked through space like miniature suns. Kinetic railguns fired solid metal projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. The combined firepower of 5 human warships hammered the anomaly's outer edge in a display of destruction that lit up the surrounding space like a supernova. The entity recoiled in shock and pain. Not because the weapons were causing serious damage, but because nothing had ever attacked it so directly and aggressively. These creatures were not trying to rescue the bait carefully while avoiding danger. They were trying to destroy the hunter completely. "Direct hit," Torres shouted over the noise of the weapons firing. "The anomaly is fluctuating. Whatever that thing is, it does not like being shot at." Through the chaos of the battle, more Corvani ships began to flicker and fade as the entity tried to feed faster. But the constant weapons fire was disrupting its control over the trapped vessels. Some of them began to drift closer to normal space, their blue glow fading. The trap was weakening, but not fast enough. At the current rate, all the alien ships would be consumed before the humans could break them free. Kane realized they needed to do something more dramatic to save the prisoners. That was when Captain Marcus Kane made a decision that would become a legend told throughout the galaxy for generations to come. "All ships, ramming speed," he ordered, calmly. "We are going into that anomaly. If this thing wants to trap us, let's see how it handles visitors who fight back." The entity that had created this trap was older than most stars in the galaxy. It had been feeding on living beings for over 10,000 years, growing stronger and more intelligent with each meal. During that time, it had learned to understand the psychology of different species: fear, hope, caution, desperation. These emotions were like flavors to the creature. It knew exactly how to manipulate them. When species discovered its trap, they usually reacted in predictable ways. The cautious ones would study the situation for days or weeks, giving the entity time to prepare better defenses. The brave ones would mount rescue operations, but they would plan carefully and bring overwhelming force. The smart ones would retreat and warn their governments, but they would always return eventually with bigger fleets. But as the 5 human ships accelerated directly toward the anomaly at full combat speed, the entity felt something it had not experienced in millennia: complete confusion. These creatures were not following any pattern it understood. They were not being cautious, brave, or smart. They were being something else entirely. The first human ship, Kane's Vengeance, hit the outer edge of the anomaly at nearly maximum speed. Reality twisted around the vessel as it punched through layers of distorted space-time. The ship's hull began to glow red from the incredible forces acting on it, but it kept moving forward. On the bridge, Kane gripped his command chair as the ship shook violently. Warning alarms screamed from every console. The lights flickered as power systems struggled to compensate for the impossible physics surrounding them. Through the view screen, he could see space itself bending and folding like liquid. "Hull integrity at 70% and falling," shouted Chief Engineer Amy Walsh through the communication system. "Captain, these forces are tearing us apart." "How long can we hold together?" Kane asked. "Maybe 10 minutes at this rate." "Then we have 10 minutes to finish this," Kane replied, calmly. The other 4 human ships followed the Vengeance into the anomaly, each one pushing deeper into the twisted space that served as the entity's feeding ground. Here, the normal laws of physics were merely suggestions. Up and down had no meaning. Time moved in strange circles. Distance became flexible, and cause did not always lead to effect, but the humans had brought their own rules to this fight. Target. "The gravitational focal points," Kane ordered, his ship's weapons blazing even as sections of the hull were being torn away by dimensional stress. "If this thing needs the trapped ships to maintain its feeding cycle, let's give it something to worry about." The entity lashed out with tendrils of pure darkness, trying to wrap around the human ships and drain their life force as it had done to so many others. But instead of trying to escape or defend themselves, the humans did something that defied all logical survival instincts. They attacked the tendrils directly. Captain Rex Dalton's Retribution opened fire with every weapon it carried: plasma beams sliced through the dark energy like swords cutting smoke. "Kane, whatever this thing is, it bleeds." Dalton's voice came through the static-filled communication channel. "Keep shooting." The remaining 12 Corvani vessels were now close enough to normal space that their own weapons could contribute to the battle. Research Director Kaney's voice came through the communication system, filled with amazement and disbelief. "Impossible! The entity's grip on us is weakening. Your ships are actually hurting it." Captain Sarah Cross of the Warhawk laughed grimly as her vessel's experimental quantum torpedoes found their target. Her ship was the smallest in the fleet, but it carried the most advanced weapons. "That is because we are not trying to escape this trap, alien friend. We are trying to break it from the inside out." The entity was learning that it had made a serious mistake. For thousands of years, it had fed on species that valued their own survival above all else. When faced with overwhelming danger, most creatures would try to save themselves first and worry about others later. This was logical and predictable. But humans were not logical. They were products of a death world that had taught them that some things were more important than personal survival. When innocent lives were threatened, humans did not calculate odds or consider alternatives. They simply attacked whatever was causing the threat, regardless of the cost to themselves. The entity tried a different approach. It focused all its power on the Warhawk, wrapping the small ship in layers of dark energy and beginning to crush it slowly. This should have caused the other human ships to retreat or at least change their tactics to save their companion. Instead, Captain Sarah Cross did something that made the entity question everything it thought it knew about intelligent life. She accelerated toward the entity's core. "This is Cross to all ships." Her voice came through the communication channel, calm and steady despite the fact that her ship was being destroyed around her. "I am initiating self-destruct sequence. Tell them back home that Earth's children do not abandon those who call for help." The explosion that followed was unlike anything the entity had ever experienced. The Warhawk's fusion reactor did not simply explode. It was deliberately overloaded to create a controlled antimatter reaction. The blast tore through the heart of the anomaly like a spear of pure energy, causing reality itself to scream in protest. The entity's death throes sent shockwaves through dimensions that mortal minds were not meant to perceive. Space twisted. Back on itself, time hiccuped, and the boundary between existence and void became temporarily meaningless. When the chaos finally settled, the dark sphere that had trapped so many victims was gone. 11 Corvani ships found themselves floating. In normal space, their impossible prison finally broken. Their blue glow faded as the entity's influence over them disappeared. Life support systems that had been failing began to stabilize. Engines that had been frozen started working again. Of the 5 human vessels that had come to their rescue, 4 remained. The Vengeance, Retribution, Defiance, and Thunder hung in space, their hulls scarred and blackened from the battle. The Warhawk was gone, along with Captain Sarah Cross and her crew of 300, but the entity was dead. The trap that had claimed dozens of rescue fleets over the centuries was broken forever. The Void Sector was safe again. Research Director Caney opened a communication channel to the human ships. His voice was filled with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "Captain Kane, your species has done something that was thought to be impossible. You have destroyed a force that has terrorized this region of space for millennia. But I must ask, why did Captain Cross sacrifice her ship and crew? You could have found another way to defeat the entity." Kane was quiet for a long moment before answering. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of human history and the pain of losing a friend. "Director Caney, you asked us why Captain Cross chose to die for people she had never met. The answer is simple. We are human. When someone calls for help, we answer. When innocents are threatened, we fight. When evil shows itself, we destroy it. We do these things not because they are easy or safe or logical. We do them because they are right." The Corvani scientist was silent for several seconds. Finally, he spoke again. "Captain Kane, the Corvani people have encountered many species during our travels across the galaxy. We have met beings who are stronger than humans, more intelligent than humans, more advanced than humans. But we have never met anyone quite like humans. You are terrifying and wonderful at the same time." Kane smiled, but it was a sad smile. He was thinking about Sarah Cross and all the other humans who had died doing the right thing. "Director Caney, the galaxy calls us Deathworlders because our home planet tried to kill us every day. What the galaxy does not understand is that Earth did not just make us hard to kill, it made us willing to die for something greater than ourselves." As the human fleet began rescue operations for the freed Corvani ships, word of the battle started, spreading across the galaxy. The story would grow in the telling, but the basic facts would remain the same. When an ancient evil had used innocent lives as bait, humanity had responded with the only answer they knew how to give: total commitment, regardless of the cost. The galaxy was beginning to learn that when you called for help, it was not the councils, ships that would arrive first. It was the humans. And they would keep coming until everyone was safe or until there were no more humans left to answer the call. Some species found this comforting, others found it terrifying. But everyone agreed on one thing: the universe was a safer place because humans existed in it. The aftermath of the battle in the Void sector was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. As the human ships worked to rescue the Corvani survivors, reports of what had happened began spreading through every communication network from the core worlds to the outer rim colonies. The story seemed impossible to believe, but the evidence was overwhelming. An ancient entity that had terrorized space travelers for thousands of years was dead. Destroyed not by a massive fleet or some advanced superweapon, but by 5 human ships whose crews had simply decided that some things were more important than their own survival. Captain Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching as his remaining ships coordinated the rescue efforts. The Corvani vessels were badly damaged from their long imprisonment, and many of their crew members needed immediate medical attention. Kane's people worked without rest to transfer supplies, medical equipment, and emergency personnel to the alien ships. "Captain," Commander Voss reported from her station, "we have successfully evacuated all critical patients from the Corvani ships. Our medical teams report that most of the survivors will make full recoveries, though some are suffering from what our doctors are calling dimensional exposure syndrome. Apparently, being trapped in that anomaly for weeks has caused some unusual side effects." Kane nodded. "What kind of side effects?" "Nothing life-threatening, sir. Some of the Corvani are experiencing minor time displacement. They age a few seconds slower than normal. Others can see slightly into parallel dimensions. Our doctors say the effects will probably fade over time." "Probably?" "Well, sir, we have never treated dimensional exposure syndrome before. We are making it up as we go along." Kane almost smiled. That was humanity in a nutshell. Making things up as they went along and somehow making it work. "What about our own casualties?" Voss checked her reports. "Beyond the loss of the Warhawk and her crew, we have 37 injured across the remaining ships. Most are minor injuries from the dimensional stress during the battle. Chief Engineer Walsh reports that all 4 ships will need major repairs before they are fully operational again. Time estimate for repairs? 6 weeks minimum, sir. The dimensional forces twisted our hull plating in ways that should not be physically possible. Some sections of the ship are actually older than they were before the battle." Kane rubbed his forehead. "The paperwork alone would take months. How do you explain to Fleet Command that parts of your ship have aged backwards? How do you write a report about killing something that existed in multiple dimensions at once?" "Sir," Commander Torres called from his tactical station, "we are receiving an incoming transmission. It is from Fleet Admiral Harrison himself." Kane sighed. Admiral Harrison was his direct superior and one of the most practical military leaders in human space. He was also famous for his explosive temper when his captains disobeyed orders. "Put him through, Commander." The main screen flickered to life, showing the stern face of Fleet Admiral Harrison. He was sitting in his office on Earth, and behind him, Kane could see the blue oceans and white clouds of humanity's homeworld. Harrison's gray hair was perfectly arranged, and his uniform was spotless. Everything about him suggested order, discipline, and adherence to regulations. "Captain Kane," Harrison said, his voice carefully controlled, "I have just finished reading your preliminary report about events in the Void sector. Am I to understand that you directly disobeyed standing orders, took 5 ships into forbidden space, and engaged an unknown entity in combat without authorization?" "Yes, sir," Kane replied simply. "And during this unauthorized mission, you lost 1 ship and 300 crew members?" "Yes, sir." "And you did all of this to rescue alien civilians from a species we had never encountered before?" "Yes, sir." Admiral Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Kane had served under him for over 10 years, and he could tell the Admiral was struggling with something. Finally, Harrison leaned forward in his chair. "Kane, Do you have any idea how much paperwork this is going to generate? I have reports from 17 different alien governments asking what the hell happened out there. The Galactic Council is demanding a full explanation. The Defense Ministry wants to know why you ignored direct orders, and the media is calling you everything from a hero to a war criminal. I understand, sir. No, Kane, I do not think you do. Understand? Harrison's expression softened slightly. The Corvani government has formally requested that humanity be granted emergency response authority throughout their territory. 3 other alien species have made similar requests in the past 24 hours. The Nexari Trade Federation wants to hire human ships as escort vessels for their merchant convoys, and the Council itself is considering a proposal to make the human fleet the official emergency response force for the entire galaxy. Kane was stunned. Sir, Kane, what you and your people did out there has changed how every species in the galaxy thinks about humanity. Before this, we were seen as useful allies but dangerous neighbors. Now, we are being viewed as the galaxy's protectors. Do you understand what that means? It means more work, sir? Harrison actually laughed. Kane, it means that from now on, every time someone in the galaxy calls for help, they will expect humans to answer. Every time there is a disaster, a crisis, or a threat to innocent life, the galaxy will look to us for a solution. Are we prepared for that kind of responsibility? Kane thought about Captain Sarah Cross and her crew. They had died saving aliens they had never met from a threat they barely understood. They had done it without hesitation, without complaint, and without expecting any reward. That was what humans did. That was who they were. Sir, with respect, we have been taking that responsibility since the day we first left Earth. The only difference now is that the galaxy has finally noticed. Admiral, Harrison nodded slowly. Perhaps you are right, Kane. In any case, you and your crews are being recalled to Earth immediately. The Council wants to hold formal hearings about the Void Sector incident. They want to understand how you defeated an entity that had been killing rescue fleets for centuries. What should I tell them, sir? Tell them the truth, Kane. Tell them that when humans encounter evil, we do not negotiate with it, study it, or try to understand its motivations. We kill it. And we keep killing it until it stops threatening innocent people. The transmission ended, leaving Kane alone with his thoughts. Through the view screen, he could see the Corvani ships slowly making their way toward the nearest safe port. Thousands of alien lives had been saved because 5 human captains had decided to ignore orders and do what was right. But Kane knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and it was full of predators like the entity they had just killed. Slavers, pirates, tyrants, and worse, all of them preying on those who could not defend themselves. If humanity was truly going to become the galaxy's protectors, they would need more ships, more crew members, and more captains willing to put their lives on the line for strangers. Commander Voss, Kane called, send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we will need to expand the rescue fleet. I have a feeling we are going to be very busy. As the human ships began their journey home, none of them noticed the small alien probe that had been watching the battle from a safe distance. The probe belonged to a species that humans had never encountered, a race of beings who had been quietly observing the galaxy for centuries. The probe's operators had watched the destruction of the ancient entity with great interest. They had seen how the humans fought, how they died, and how they refused to abandon those who needed help. Now they had a decision to make. Their own people were facing a threat that they could not handle alone. Pirates from the galactic rim had been raiding their colonies, taking slaves and destroying entire worlds. The pirates were too strong, too numerous, and too well armed for any normal military response. But perhaps the pirates were not too strong for humans. The probe began transmitting a new signal across the galaxy. Another distress call, another plea for help. Soon, it would reach human space, and when it did, the galaxy would learn once again that when someone called for help, humans answered. No matter how dangerous the mission, no matter how impossible the odds, no matter what the cost, because that was what humans did. And the galaxy was beginning to understand that this was exactly what it needed. 6 months after the battle in the Void Sector, Captain Marcus Kane stood before the Galactic Council in the Great Chamber on Nexus Prime. The massive room could hold representatives from over 300 different species, and today it was completely full. Delegates sat in floating platforms, arranged in concentric circles around the central speaking area, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors, shapes, and sizes. Kane wore his dress uniform, the dark blue fabric bearing the scars and decorations of a career spent protecting others. The metal ribbons on his chest told the story of humanity's military history, the defense of Luna, the Battle of Titan, the liberation of Kepler 442b, and now the Void Sector incident. Each ribbon represented lives saved and prices paid. The chamber buzzed with conversations in dozens of different languages as representatives discussed what they had learned about the human response to crisis situations. 6 months ago, most of these beings had viewed humans as useful but unpredictable allies. Today, they were debating whether to formally recognize humanity as the galaxy's primary emergency response force. Chancellor Vex of the Corvani delegation rose first. He was a tall, thin being with blue-gray skin and large, intelligent eyes. His people had been among the first to encounter humans in diplomatic situations, and their relationship had always been cordial but cautious. "Captain Kane," Chancellor Vex said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "Your species' response to our distress call has left my people in a state of profound confusion. According to our mathematical models, your fleet's actions in the Void Sector made no tactical sense. You lost 2 ships and over 400 crew members to save strangers from a species you had never encountered before. Our best strategists cannot understand the logic behind such a decision." Kane had expected this question. Every alien species he had ever met tried to analyze human behavior using logic, mathematics, and cost-benefit calculations. They never understood that humans operated according to different rules entirely. "Chancellor Vex," Kane replied, "we did not make that decision because it was logical or tactically sound. We made it because it was the right thing to do. When someone calls for help, humans answer. That is simply who we are." Counselor Prime Thane, representing the Galactic Military Coordination Office, leaned forward in his floating platform. He was a massive being, heavily armored and built for war. His species had dominated their home system through military conquest, and they understood strength and power. But they did not understand sacrifice. "Captain Kane," Thane said, his voice like grinding stone, "our preliminary studies of the entity you destroyed suggest it had been responsible for the disappearance of over 30 civilizations in the past millennium. Military fleets, exploration vessels, even heavily armed conquest fleets. All of them vanished without a trace when they encountered this creature. How did your small fleet succeed where so many others failed?" Kane thought about the battle, remembering the moment when Captain Sarah Cross had chosen to die rather than let the entity continue its feeding. "Counselor Thane, we succeeded because we did not treat it as a rescue mission. We treated it as a war. When something threatens innocent lives, humans do not calculate odds or consider diplomatic solutions. We identify the threat and eliminate it." A murmur ran through the assembly. The concept of approaching every crisis as a war to be won rather than a problem to be solved was foreign to most galactic species. They preferred negotiation, careful planning, and minimal risk. The idea of charging directly into danger without concern for personal safety seemed like madness. Ambassador Lin from the Nexari Trade Federation stood slowly. She was a graceful being with silver skin and multiple arms, each one capable of performing complex calculations simultaneously. Her people controlled much of the galaxy's commerce and were known for their careful, methodical approach to every decision. "Captain Kane," she said, her voice musical and precise, "there are rumors spreading through the outer colonies and trade routes. They say that when a distress call goes out anywhere in the galaxy, it is not the Council peacekeeping ships that answer first anymore. It is the human fleet. Some of our member species are expressing concern about this development. They worry that humanity is becoming too involved in galactic affairs. Kane felt his jaw tighten. This was the argument he had been dreading. For centuries, the galaxy had operated under a system where each species was primarily responsible for protecting its own people. The Council provided coordination and support, but actual rescue operations were usually handled by local forces or private security companies. The problem with this system was that it did not work very well. Local forces were often outgunned by whatever threat they faced. Private security companies were expensive and unreliable, and the Council's own peacekeeping fleet was stretched thin across thousands of star systems. "Ambassador Lin," Kane said, carefully, "let me be very clear about something. Humanity will answer every distress call we receive, regardless of the species involved, the location of the emergency, or the personal cost to our crews. If that concerns some members of this Council, perhaps they should ask themselves why they find the idea of universal emergency response to be threatening." The chamber fell silent. Kane had just challenged the fundamental assumptions that governed galactic politics. Most species believed in protecting their own interests first, and helping others only when it was convenient or profitable. The idea that one species would risk everything to save strangers was unprecedented. Research Director Caney, now fully recovered from his ordeal in the Void sector, approached the central speaking platform. He moved slowly, still bearing the effects of his exposure to dimensional distortion, but his voice was clear and strong. "Honored Council," he said, "the Corvani people formally request that humanity be granted emergency response authority throughout all of galactic space. Not because they are the strongest species or the most technologically advanced, but because they are the only ones who can be trusted to arrive without question when others are in danger." The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. Representatives argued about jurisdiction, funding, legal authority, and political implications. Some species worried that giving humans such broad authority would upset the balance of power in the galaxy. Others pointed out that the current system had failed to protect countless innocent lives over the centuries. In the end, the vote was closer than Kane had expected, but it passed by a narrow margin. Humanity was granted emergency response authority throughout galactic space, with the understanding that they would coordinate with local authorities whenever possible, but would not be required to wait for permission before responding to crisis situations. As Kane left the Council chambers, Commander Voss fell into step beside him. She carried a tablet filled with new reports and requests for assistance that had arrived during the hearings. "Sir," she said, "we have received 43 new distress calls while you were in session. 7 from the Spiral Arm, 12 from the Outer Rim, and 24 from sectors that the Council considers too dangerous for standard rescue operations." Kane looked out through the massive viewing ports that lined the corridor. Beyond the transparent metal, he could see the lights of thousands of ships from hundreds of different species. Each one represented a world, a civilization, a collection of lives that might someday need help. "Any immediate emergencies?" he asked. "3 of them, sir. A Zalani colony ship has suffered catastrophic engine failure in the Helix Nebula. A mining operation in the frontier zone is under attack by unknown raiders. And there are reports of a plague outbreak on Kepler 438b that has overwhelmed local medical facilities." Kane calculated distances and travel times in his head. The human fleet had grown significantly since the Void sector incident. But they were still only one species trying to protect an entire galaxy. They would need to split their forces, coordinate with local authorities, and hope that they could reach everyone in time. "Signal the fleet," Kane ordered. "All ships are to prepare for immediate departure. We have work to do." As they walked toward the docking bays where the human ships waited, Voss hesitated for a moment. "Sir, can I ask you something?" Of course, Commander. Do you think we can really do this? Protect the entire galaxy, I mean. There are so many worlds, so many species, so many different kinds of threats. What if we spread ourselves too thin? What if we cannot save everyone? Kane stopped walking and turned to face her. Through the viewing port behind her, he could see Earth's blue light in the distance, the death world that had created a species crazy enough to think they could save everyone. Commander, he said, 6 months ago, 50,000 Corvani civilians were going to die because no one was willing to risk their own lives to save them. Today, all of those people are alive and safe with their families. Captain Sarah Cross and her crew paid the price for that victory, but they considered it a fair trade. He looked back at the tablet in Voss's hands, with its list of people calling for help across the galaxy. We cannot save everyone, Commander, but we can try. And as long as humans exist in this galaxy, anyone who calls for help will know that someone is coming, someone who will not stop, will not retreat, and will not abandon them no matter how dangerous the situation becomes. Kane started walking again, heading toward his ship and the next crisis that needed to be solved. Behind him, Voss smiled and followed. She had her answer. The galaxy had learned something important in the void sector. When death came calling for the innocent, there was one species that would answer that call with a simple message: not today. As the human fleet departed Nexus Prime, their engines glowing with the light of 1,000 suns, they carried with them the hopes and fears of an entire galaxy. Some species found comfort in knowing that help would always come when they called. Others worried about the implications of depending on a species that treated dying for strangers as the most natural thing in the universe. But everyone agreed on one fundamental truth. The galaxy was a safer place because humans existed in it. And as long as they continued to answer every call for help with the same uncompromising determination they had shown in the void sector, innocent people throughout. The stars would sleep a little more peacefully at night. The age of the Deathworlders had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.